Such a big win for Arsenal. So much to dissect, so much significance. We actually learned what the key to Arsenal's success this season will be. We actually now know exactly what Arsenal need to do in order to win the Premier League. Fairly recently, some Arsenal wins have actually prompted more questions than answers they've delivered. But this win that we saw against Aston Villa, it was all about answers. It told the world who Arsenal are. It told the world what Arsenal need. And it told the world how Arsenal can win the Premier League. The way that Arsenal win the Premier League, a huge key, it's Martin Odegaard. Martin Odegaard's performance was simply sensational. Now, I think that there has been a conversation around Martin Odegaard, around the Arsenal fan base. I'm not saying a majority, but I'm saying there were murmurings about Martin Odegaard's captaincy. Like, one of my best mates, an Arsenal season ticket holder, he has been saying that Martin Odegaard should be stripped of the captaincy. That sounds more aggressive than it should be, but the captaincy should be removed politely from Odegaard and given to Declan Rice. Declan Rice is the ever-present. Declan Rice is the swashbuckling midfielder. Declan Rice is the gladiator. And Declan Rice, therefore, should be the captain. Now, I don't think it's an absurd proposition when you think about who Rice is, when you think about what he does for Arsenal, and when you think about his responsibility and the way that the Arsenal captain has a lot of responsibility. Like, this is quite interesting. The Arsenal captain isn't like a captain at another club. Like the Arsenal captain, it's an armband that is steeped in tradition. It really does matter. He has responsibilities that don't befall other captains at other clubs. Like the way that Tony Adams would always set the tone in terms of what shirt you wear. If the captain wears short sleeves, the rest of the team wears short sleeves. If the captain wears long sleeves, the rest of the team wear long sleeves. The way that Arsenal dictate who their captain will be. It's not a managerial appointment. It's not a manager and senior players appointment. It is a democratically elected position. So the captain at Arsenal Football Club is an incredibly big position. And Martin Odegaard was the heir apparent. And at one point, you could easily say Martin Odegaard, the obvious captain. Declan Rice's form, Declan Rice, the player that he is, the man that he is, the footballer that he is, the leader that he is, has made it at least a conversation. It's not disrespectful to Odegaard, but I can even see why some would say that it's a conversation. And in fact, Tony Adams himself said that it was a conversation. Tony Adams, Mr. Arsenal himself, said Declan Rice should be the captain. So I think that you can understand why some would say Odegaard doesn't necessarily have those captain materials. Anyway, Martin Odegaard is suddenly back in the team. Arsenal are looking like Arsenal again, and Martin Odegaard is at the epicentre of everything good that Arsenal do. And I understand why Odegaard could have his doubters on the outside of the game. I understand why people like me would maybe question Martin Odegaard. But what is really significant is where Martin Odegaard ranks in the Arsenal dressing room, in the Arsenal hierarchy. Everyone at the club, and I'm sure that a lot of supporters of Arsenal will agree with this. We can debate it, we can have a conversation about it, but I spoke about the democratic way that Arsenal choose their captain. I don't know what the numbers were, but the players, the staff, voted on who should be Arsenal captain. All Mikel Arteta told us was, it was a landslide. It was by a mile is the term he used, I believe. When asked, was it close? Whose name was put forward? All Mikel Arteta told us was that it was Martin Odegaard by a mile. So his position in the club is incredibly secure. He is incredibly highly respected at the club. And then you think about him as a player. Look at the player that he has come back as. When you're thinking about that game against Aston Villa, you're thinking Villa are a good side. They've recently beat Arsenal. They're the form team of Europe. And they are going into that game without arguably their best player, arguably their most important player, Declan Rice. The midfield, Martin Odegaard, could be a little bit lightweight against a very physical Aston Villa midfield. Suddenly, the link-up play, the link-up play between Zubimendi and Martin Odegaard, the way that they controlled the midfield, the way that Odegaard was dictating the tempo, telling the rest of his teammates there's something amazing. And I wish that you could still do this. When I was a kid, you had something called Player Cam. And I guarantee you, if you were to watch just Martin Odegaard, if you were to see him, he is the orchestrator. He's the conductor. When you see an orchestra, there's a conductor at the front. Martin Odegaard, whether he's on the ball or not, he's telling everybody else what to do. He is the brains of that team. He is conducting the entire rhythm of Arsenal Football Club. And then you think about the goal. Think about the goal that was scored by Zubimendi. And I don't think that we can justify this in a bigger way. This is one of the most significant things that you can say about Arsenal. I remember when Manchester City were at their absolute best. I remember seeing Joao Cancelo curl a ball over, playing at right back, curl a ball over for an assist with the outside of his foot. Bearing in mind he was a left back. He's playing left back with his right foot. He puts in an amazing pass, a kind of pass that Kevin De Bruyne would be proud of. And I remember saying, there's something amazing about a team when all of the best players are borrowing the best attributes from one another. So the left back is assisting like De Bruyne. De Bruyne is defending like a centre-half. Everybody is borrowing from one another. Look at that moment. Look at what Zubimendi and Martin Odegaard did. Nominally, right, in theory, Zubimendi is the defensive midfielder. Martin Odegaard is, again, theoretically, the attacking midfielder. What happens? The attacking midfielder is deep, wins the ball in the way that a defensive midfielder would. So Odegaard's the attacker. He wins the ball. Not something that you really associate with Martin Odegaard. You know, if there is a criticism you could level at him, it would be that he's lightweight. What does he do, though? Smashes through Jadon Sancho. I mean, Jadon Sancho's another player that you could say is a little bit lightweight and not necessarily up for the fight. But Odegaard was. Smashes through Sancho. Looks for the run. Who's the run? It's his defensive midfielder. Plays the ball with perfection. Supplies it. Puts it on a plate. And that pass is just the moment. That pass really is the moment, and the finish tells you everything. So that balance in that midfield is everything that you would want if you are Mikel Arteta. You are looking at the flow, the ebb and the flow of that midfield, the balance of it. And then you're looking at Odegaard totally dictating the tempo. And it was just a moment that I think represents exactly who Martin Odegaard is. You know, like over the course of the game, Martin Odegaard had like the most shots, the most touches in the final third of any Arsenal player. You know, no Arsenal player won more duels than Martin Odegaard. And when you think about that, stat, that isn't the way that I see Odegaard. You know, he is the kind of player that I often would label in a very basic terminology, kind of a luxury player, like a beautiful footballer. Not necessarily the kind of player that is going to win the ball back more frequently than any other player on his team. Not necessarily the kind of player that is going to win more duels than any other player on his team. But that is what Martin Odegaard did. And it isn't rare. Like, think about his performance against Brighton the game before. You know, open to scoring, dictating the tempo of that game, and scoring the opening goal in a game like that when there was question marks. I think, again, it's huge. So when you think about the key to Arsenal's success, keeping Odegaard fit is imperative. Gabriel fit, again, it's obviously imperative. But the Gabriel one, I feel like everyone talks about. I feel like people know that Gabriel needs to be fit. For Arsenal to succeed, Gabriel, lethal in both boxes, hateful footballer, which is a great quality. Like the one thing, again, that you could say about this Arsenal team, maybe they're too nice. So they need Gabriel. But I think Odegaard being fit now, off the back of what I've seen, it's just imperative. And I'll be totally open with you. At the beginning of the season, I wasn't even 100% convinced that Martin Odegaard was going to be in Arsenal's best 11. Obviously, I knew Martin Odegaard was going to feature. Obviously, I knew that Martin Odegaard was going to have an integral part to play at Arsenal this season. But I wasn't 100% sure that Martin Odegaard was in Arsenal's best 11. Champions League semi-final, does Odegaard play? For example, you know, a game against Aston Villa over Christmas, does Odegaard play? Because, rightly or wrongly, I thought that Eberechi Eze was going to do that job. I thought that Eberechi Eze being signed, I thought Eberechi Eze last year was amazing. And I thought that Odegaard could have his work cut out to displace Eze from that side. You're suddenly looking at it and there is no debate. If Martin Odegaard is fit, Martin Odegaard will play. It's as simple as that. He is the Arsenal captain for a reason. And anybody who has been questioning it, including Tony Adams, look, football's a game of opinions. But I think that opinion has now been proved incorrect. You cannot really have a conversation about should Martin Odegaard be the captain of Arsenal? Should he be in the first team? Of course he should. When he is playing like that, when he is not only demanding the most from himself, but demanding the most from everyone else, he is the captain marvel of the team. And in the absence of Declan Rice, I think it really is huge. So, boiling it down, keeping Odegaard fit, getting Odegaard playing to the level that is required, that could be the answer to Arsenal's season. You know, they looked immense against Villa. In that second half, it was the best that they have played this season. It was, in my opinion at least, Mikel Arteta's best win at Arsenal since he's been at the club. People will talk about Real Madrid, but it isn't for me. I think the way that he outthought a cunning and wily manager like Unai Emery really is significant. And they got it so right. Scoring goals galore. And the quality of the goals was huge. And Odegaard really was at the epicentre of it. So Arsenal are top of the league at the turn of the year. Now, I always see this as significant. I always see this as something so important. But Arsenal need to be wary. They can't get complacent, and they can't allow this to be a luxurious position. They need to have a position that they're chasing. They need to visualise that they're chasing. Look, you have a cushion for a reason. You get yourself a cushion because then, if things go wrong, you have the cushion. But they need to be relentless because they have bad experiences here. They've had this false sense of security before. You can go back to Wenger. I think Arsenal have been top of the league 4 times at Christmas and not won the league. So I think that they need to be really careful. And when people talk about this, you always talk about the Wenger side. I think it was Wenger's side was top of the league Christmas Day 2002 and I think 2007. And Manchester United were chasing them both times. And I think the first time Manchester United were 4 points behind. The second time Manchester United were 1 point behind. And Manchester United won the league on both occasions. By a gap. By a 4 or 5 point gap. So Arsenal know that this ultimately means nothing. Arsenal know that this points accumulation only means something. And this performance only means something if they can get it over the line. And Arteta knows that himself. 2022, 2023. They had a 5 point and a 1 point gap over Man City. And they know how that ended. But those recent reminders could stand them in good stead. Those recent reminders are so important to who Arsenal are. Because Arsenal, of late, they've dropped points. They've played badly. They've won ugly. They've secured a bad win, which feels like an oxymoron to me still, but we explored it and we know that it was true. They've been hit by injuries. It hasn't gone their way. But most crucially, they've survived. They are at the top of the league and they are at the top of the league for a reason. And there is some good news. Odegaard back. Gabriel back and amongst the goals. Kai Havertz named in a matchday squad for the first time since August. And Gabriel Jesus scoring. Not just scoring, by the way. Scoring a quality goal. It feels like it's moving. Ben White, by the way. Durian Timber made their returns. So it does feel like Arsenal are moving in the right direction. And sometimes, well, in fact, not sometimes, every time. You have to get through adversity to win a league. You can't talk about injuries. You can't talk about, we had a lot of injuries, therefore we didn't win the league. Yeah. It happens. When Liverpool were trying to win the league and Alan Hansen got injured, they didn't win it. These things happen to every single team, but you don't necessarily think about them. So you can't talk about the injuries. But Arsenal won't. And Arteta certainly won't be making the excuses. Big day. And it feels like a traditional day. When you're talking about the Arsenal captain, coming up to the FA Cup weekend, we'll be talking about yellow ribbons being tied around a tree and all that soon. Only the realist Arsenal fans know what I'm on about there. Now, look, it's been interesting, and I think that Arsenal should be over the moon. I also want to say thank you very much to every single one of you. I want to wish you a happy new year. I hope that you've had a brilliant year. And if you haven't, next year will be your year. Keep strong, keep believing, and for the final time this year, Arsenal delivered us a delectable medley of footballing splendour. Happy New Year. Ta-da.